Hello, hello, hello. It's that time of the week again. It's the National League podcast, and you're listening to Aaron in the presenting driving seat this week in place of Grant. So instead of Scottish dulcet tones, you've got Mancunian dulcet tones. And I'm joined this week by Luke. So, Luke, do you want to say hello?
Hello, yeah, you've got my Yorkshire dulcet tones as well. So yeah, proper northern tonight, isn't it? Lineup, I would say. But yeah, it's good to be on again. Obviously, I haven't been on for quite some time. I think it might be my first podcast of 2024 on, of course, lower league look. So it's good. It's good to be on tonight.
Yeah, absolutely, and obviously we've got a bit more freedom tonight because the snow and the storms meant a lot of games in our division didn't survive the weekend. So we've actually only got 4 games to analyze this week. But then we're going to talk about everyone's favorite podcast topic and transfer rumors and transfers that have already happened because I know my club have been very active today and across the window altogether. So we've got that to look forward to. But just to start off, I think in sort of honour of Grant not being here, I think we should start with Hartlepool and their big result at the weekend. So, Luke, do you want to take us away?
Yeah, can do. Of course, they were going to an Ebbsfleet side that I think, and it's common knowledge now that they're struggling near the bottom of the table. They had quite a good start to the season, like we keep saying, but in the past couple of months, they've drastically showing that they're probably not good enough for this division the way they're performing. And Hartlepool have been out of favour. They've just appointed a new manager. Well, Lenny Lawrence is, of course, the caretaker manager, and then now, of course, Phillips has gone in as the permanent manager. Going into this game, though, I think the big difference for me when you look at Hartlepool's recent form is, of course, Mancini returning to the side.
Mhm.
I think he's had a major impact on them. And we saw on Saturday they went to Ebbsfleet away from home, which is a long way to go. And of course, Mancini got the goal again. And it just, for me, it looks like he's making a difference going forward. And, if we remember rightly, at the start of the season, when Hartlepool were doing very well near the top of the table, the likes of Mancini were key players. And ever since he's been injured, they've not been the same team. So I think to see him back in the side now, it's clearly having a positive impact on Hartlepool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, you don't just want to say Hartlepool are kind of like a one team, sorry, a one player team because that might be a little bit unfair. But like you say, the impact with and without Mancini is so stark and so contrasting. And I think it's. I want to get your opinion because I've seen a lot of people say Mancini is probably maybe top 3, top 5 centre mids in the league. And from I know we've not seen him play a lot because of his injury, but from what I have seen of him, I think that assessment is probably quite fair. I think you're probably looking at maybe what you're looking at maybe Naylor, Con Clark. I mean, I know he's not played a game yet. Maybe it's a little bit biased, but I would say pedigree-wise, I would probably put Tom Conlon up there as well, who we've just signed from Port Vale. You would imagine he's going to have the pedigree, but other than that, Mancini's really impressed me, and I think if you're Hartlepool, you're obviously very thankful that they've got that extension clause in the contract, but also they'll definitely be suitors at his door, won't they? So, where do you think? What would if he was to move on from Hartlepool after this season? I'm going to put you on the spot, Luke. Here, give me the name of the perfect suitor for Mancini.
A club at the moment that I would say it'd suit, and I'd probably go as far to say maybe your club would suit in that attacking midfield role. I know you've just made 1 or 2 new signings at the moment, but he's someone for me. He offers flair. He's someone that excites me in this division, and there's obviously a number of players at every team that there's players in the lower leagues that excite you and you want to go and watch. And he's certainly a player that's capable of playing at a lot higher level. I'd go as far to say a League One player from
Hmm.
what I've seen. And when he first signed for Hartlepool, when he at the start of the season, a lot of Hartlepool fans were excited to see what had come from him, and he was proving the ability that he's capable of with his goal contributions. And it's another case, isn't it, of probably the reason he's at this level is due to his injuries. And ever
Yeah.
since he's returned, since he's had that injury, I think to come back from a long-term injury like that and have such an instant impact says a lot about him. So for me, yeah, I think he's a player that could play a lot higher level, in my opinion.
I think to play devil's advocate a little bit though, it's interesting because I think we do have to take into account obviously he looks a phenomenal talent, but we've not seen him do like a prolonged period of form yet because of his awful injury. So if he can keep it up for from now till the end of the season, then I think the call for him to play higher are more than justified. But yeah, I think obviously if you haven't seen his goal, by the way, I think we put it on lower league look from Saturday. What a strike! What a strike! He literally just picks up the ball from like maybe like 5 yards higher than the centre circle, and drives forward to maybe 25 yards and just pings one into the top left corner. It was some strike, weren't it, Luke? Have you seen it?
No, to be honest, I haven't seen it. It's like I've said from my social media, it's been quite quiet at the moment. I've been proper busy, but he's that type of player though that with his goals, he produces some quite impressive ones as well. I know at the start of the season, probably a similar goal to that, he took on a number of players and then beat his man. I think it was against Fylde at the start of the season. Yeah, he's certainly a player that I think shows a lot with his goal contributions, and he's someone that does excite me. When I'm watching him, and I think players like Disaruwe, Josh Umera, Gray, I think will all benefit from him
Mhm.
being back in the team because he kind of links that forward line.
Just to finish off on Hartlepool before, because I'm conscious I want to touch up on Ebbsfleet as well and how much danger we perceive them to be in at the minute. But obviously, Hartlepool have just announced the appointment of Phillips. So to me, I mean, I spoke to Grant about this. To me, it's one of them appointments that's quite risky with not too much guaranteed reward. With him, I know he's been at the lower levels, but I think it is a very risky appointment for this division. But as Grant quite rightly pointed out, who else would want to go and manage Hartlepool at the minute with the way they're being run and things like that? So, what are your thoughts on that appointment? Do you see it being a success, or do you see it being a bit of a bad mistake from the ownership again?
It's not. I'm going to be brutally honest. It's not an appointment that particularly excites me, if that's fair in saying. I know there were rumours about Darryl Sarles going there, and they were actually. I think it's been confirmed there were contact between the two clubs. Well, between Sal and Hartlepool, I should say. So of course they haven't gone down that route, and they've gone for Kevin Phillips. Obviously he's a former player, did very well as a player, but I always have the impression that just because you're a very good footballer, which he certainly was at the top end of English football, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to become a good manager. And what he's done so far at South Shields, yes, he's won promotion with him, but it took him a couple of seasons to get them out of their league. And to say the budget that he had at South Shields, for me, he didn't pull up any trees. I don't think he's not a manager for me that's proven himself yet, and it's a big job. Hartlepool, there's clearly a lot of pressure there because they are a big club in this division, as it's known, and being a big club but not having a big budget for me adds a lot of pressure to him. So yeah, it's an interesting one, but it's just one that I'm not particularly too keen on, to be brutally honest.
Yeah, I have to agree really there. But like I said, I guess you don't get many decent names wanting to manage Hartlepool at the minute, unfortunately. So we'll see, and we wish him the best of luck. But before we move on to the other games that survived the weather, I just want to talk about Ebbsfleet and how much danger we actually perceive them to be in at the minute. Because so they've I'm just looking at the league table now that they are on 27 points, so they are joint with a Woking on 20th, just outside the drop zone. But they have only had one win in the last 5 league matches with 3 losses. So how do we think Ebbsfleet can address the slide if we think they can address the slide, and where do you think the momentum and form will come from?
Honestly, at the moment, I think it's hard to say. Of course, it feels like they're sticking with the manager, aren't they? And Dennis Kutrab, I believe it is. And he was a manager at the start of the season that excited me. I think what he did at Ebbsfleet last season, that he stormed the division below by a country mile. It just shows the gap with how they're performing this season compared to how good they looked last season. But they were a team that I thought would be okay in this division. When I look back, maybe now in hindsight, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I thought with the players that they had from last season, they had a lot of players that had previously played at this level. I thought they had an identity about them. going forward. And I don't think they have that identity about them like we saw where they were a side that had press, hunt for the ball down, and it doesn't feel like they're doing that anymore. And they're becoming more of a poor side, and you can see that when you play against them. So for me, I don't know because it feels like they're sticking out this manager. They haven't particularly made any signings in this window, and there's just no momentum there. They get the odd win, but then they don't build on it. And for me, that's the most concerning thing. They've got two big games coming up in Maidenhead away and then Oxford away. You've got to
Mhm.
be thinking at this time, if you want to get out of the drop zone, you've got to be taking at least 4 points off those
Yeah,
two sides. And then we're not even talking about Oldham and Chesterfield, who are coming up after that, who, of course, are two of the big spenders in the division.
yeah, yeah. I think, like you said, the discrepancy from the National League North and South divisions to the National League Premier is probably bigger than people think, and I think it's getting highlighted this year a little bit more. So that'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on, definitely. But I think now we should move to the other end of the division and talk about, especially for both our teams, Luke, considering neither of our games survived the weather. I think both of us should be very happy about these sets of results
Yeah.
this weekend, don't you? So
Yeah, of
I
course.
think I think with that we should move on to maybe let's move on to we will go we'll go Dorking at home to Gateshead. So we've spoke about Dorking a lot on this podcast, me, you, and Grant, about you know, whether Mark White should look to sort of step aside or whether he should just focus on the chairman side of things and get somebody with a bit more experience in to save them. And look, Grant said that and he got shot down by a Dorking fan, so I don't think that's what Dorking fans want, which is fair enough. But
To be honest,
it,
I don't think when I just going on that point, when I look at it, I just don't think it'd ever be an option if that makes sense.
yeah,
I think the model that they have there, they were a similar position last season where they were in a position and where they were struggling. And there's always been this question out there: what happens when Dorking do eventually struggle, like every side does? Will he end up sacking himself? And for me, the way it goes at Dorking, I don't think that'd ever be an option. And to be honest, I'd have trust in Mark White, and I don't think it's a case of having trust. I think he's got to know himself that he'd be able to get him out of this situation. And I think a game like we saw against Gateshead shows that that he's going to find a way out of this mess that
well,
maybe mess, but
I,
struggling at the moment.
I have to agree because I think, like you say, the positive side to having Mark White be your chairman and manager is, I know we say every manager can know the players inside out, but he will know every single one of his players inside out, and I think that helps in the sticky periods because they're going to want to run through brick walls for him, aren't they? Because it's his club. Do you know what I mean? So that's
Yeah,
always a positive, and I think they're slowly beginning to sort themselves out at the minute. But for me, I must admit, me a little bit because I was kind of expecting a comfortable Gateshead win, but it didn't transpire like that, did it, Luke?
I don't want to come across as arrogant here, but on my own show, I did predict Dorking to win, and I think
Really?
there's a lot of factors. Yeah, and I'll be honest, I put it to a 3-1 Dorking win on my show, but no, when honestly, what the reason I probably did that, and I think the reason it panned out like Dorking were to win is because Dorking always seems to be a side that will pull out results when they need to, when it starts to get a little bit nervy, and fans might be a bit concerned about them dropping into the drop zone. But what we notice is they always pull it out of the bag when they need to. They did last season and they have again. And if you look at Gateshead at the moment, they're a side certainly out of form, probably on the worst form they've been on all season. They haven't actually won in their past 4 games. And for a side that,
Mhm.
you know, has been in and around the playoffs for the majority of the season, it's a little concerning. And of course, there's a lot of factors towards that. The amount of players that have left the side in the January transfer window, that have, a few of them, of course, have gone to follow Matt Williamson, who's at MK Dons, and Stephen Ween, who produced a lot going forward, not just his goals, but his assists as well. Kieran Lofthouse is a midfielder. He's obviously been recalled and then loaned out to MK Dons as well. They've had injury issues with the likes of Ed Francis is out injured, another midfielder. Chadwick's gone back. Dinanga's not been in the best of form. So for me, you can see this coming, and you can see maybe we're seeing a different side to Gateshead now, and maybe that they're not the same team, and maybe they're not actually a side that should be eighth with the squad they currently have. Maybe
Yeah.
the reason that they're currently eighth is because of what the squad did before it got torn apart, and now because it has been basically stripped, it does feel like that they're certainly struggling. And I don't know about you, Aaron, but for me, they're a side that come the end of the season, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw them in the bottom half. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think with Gateshead, I think you make some really good points there. I think when and it comes down to, we've had this discussion a lot on this podcast, but it comes down to the different ownership models and the way you know run your transfer business. And I'm fully aware that I'm very privileged that I support Oldham now with a wealthy owner that can sign players on permanent deals. But the problem you've got when the majority of your squad is based up of loan players is they can get recalled, and they will get recalled, and then it just leaves you bare. It's the same with like teams like Rochdale, isn't it? That's how they have to survive, and they do so well to get to that point. But when the players start performing, the problem you've got is the parent clubs will say, okay, you can do it at this level, let's go and test him higher. And that's what's happening a bit at Gateshead. And I think that is kind of testament to the work that Williamson and Rob Elliott have done with that Gateshead side to get them to this position. But also, you're going to start seeing the drawbacks of that, and you're going to start seeing the sort of natural gradual drop off because of that reason. But I do think with the way Williamson had Gateshead playing and the way Elliott has got Gateshead carrying on playing, I do think they're still one of the more attractive teams in the division to watch play football. And like we didn't play them too much long ago back at Boundary Park, and they pretty much passed us off the park at home, really. And I think as long as they stick to the principles, I think they should be okay. I think Gateshead will. I'm gonna stick my neck on the line here. I think Gateshead will finish 10th. If you were to ask me to pull out a
Yeah.
prediction, I've got them finishing 10th, because I think they're more than good enough to not get involved in like a bottom half of the table battle. But I think they've lost too many key players now to be in and around that playoff chase.
I think the problem you might have with Gateshead as well is they play a very specified style of football, and that's possession-based football. And there's only a certain amount of players, especially at this level, that will be capable of doing that, playing that style of football. And they're still quite persistent and stubborn with playing that style. Now that you've lost probably 7 players are probably not in the starting lineup that were in the starting lineup back in early December because of players being recalled, injuries on a regular basis, that is. They're clearly having to bring in more players, but it's going to be very difficult to bring in players for them to gel straight away when they need them to, gel straight away and have an impact on playing in that style of football. So for me, when I look at Gateshead, I just think it's going to be a struggle this second half of the season. And, we saw at Chesterfield away from home, they got absolutely thumped
Yeah,
there. And losing to York, but also drawing to them, it is a little concerning. And I think maybe if you're a Gateshead fan, you wouldn't say you've thrown it away because there's nothing you can particularly do about it, but you'd be saying in a way what could have been maybe if we kept
yeah,
the squad
absolutely.
together. Because I think if they did, maybe you would say they could be a genuine promotion contender in those playoff spots. And at the moment, for me, when I look at them with the injuries they're having, the players recalled, players leaving, of course, they look like a bottom half side, and if not a relegation battle side, if to be brutally honest, in the last couple of games.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair, I guess. But we'll see. We'll see. I think going back to the actual game though, Dorking versus Gateshead, it is important to mention that Gateshead were down to 10 men after 25 minutes. So like it was always going to be a tough task for them, weren't it? I mean, I've seen the booty challenge, and I don't know. I don't know. I think if we could have orange cards in football, that would be an orange card for me.
In between.
It's like in the middle. I wouldn't say it's a
Yeah.
straight red, but it's definitely worthy of it, like more than a yellow. So I don't really know
Yeah.
where we go with it. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see
It
how.
would probably have the feeling if you're a Gateshead fan, if you're a Gateshead fan, you'd be saying it's a yellow, and if you're a Dorking fan, you'd be saying it's a straight wet red. To
Yeah,
be honest, and that'd literally be the bottom line. I think, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see how both the sides like progress from this moment, whether Gateshead can sort of pick themselves up, maybe do a little bit more activity in the transfer window. But I know Gateshead don't have too much finances, so it'll be interesting. But with Dorking, I think they will just kind of find a way to survive now, really, like we were just saying. So it'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on. Um, to go on to another
I just want
player.
to ask you. Can I just ask
Go on,
you?
sorry.
Sorry, Aaron, but can I just ask you one question? Right, you look at Southend at the moment. I know I'm kind of turning away, but they're obviously, of course, in 12th. Um,
Yeah,
do you think they're going to finish above Gateshead come the end of the season?
that's a good question, Luke. They've signed some good players, haven't they? Like even just this week with the embargo lifted. But so I'm looking right now. So the 6 points off, and have they got any games in hand? Let's have a look. 27, 27, and 27.
They
So
don't on Gateshead at the moment.
the 6 points off Gateshead and 7 points off the playoffs places. So it it can be done, can't it? It can be done, but I just don't know whether at this time of the season, back end of January, you know what I mean? If it was the start of January and they were getting loads of players in, then maybe. But we've got what 10 more days left of January, and I just don't know whether the gap will be too much. But with the sort of resilience and like passion that Southend side and the manager have shown this season in adversity, you can never write them off. So I can't really give you a yes or no answer really, but I don't like sitting on the fence. So if I was to give you a yes or no answer, I'll probably say the gap is probably a little bit too much at this side of the season. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see them up there.
I, do you want to? I'd actually disagree with you on that. When I look at Southend at the moment, because it's only 6 points, and we've got 19 games left of the season. I believe. I hope I've done that right. I think we have got 19 games left of the season. And when I look at Southend at the moment compared to Gateshead, I personally can't see them not picking up those 6 points. I'd go as far down to say maybe I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but maybe Hartlepool could be a side that would finish above Gateshead come the end of the season. Of course, they're performing quite well themselves, Hartlepool, at the moment in the last couple of results. For me, yeah, they're just a side that I'm not too keen on with the transition that they're having at the moment, Gateshead, and I do think it's going to be damaging for them come the end of the
Yeah,
season.
it'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on, and that's what this podcast is about, right? We come together, but we have different opinions, and we debate them. So yeah. So moving on to the other side of the playoffs battle at the minute, the other big result for both of us really this weekend was um well I say it was a big result for the playoff places, but they're not actually that close to the playoffs. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Bromley first. I was going to go to Kidderminster's big result at home to Aldershot, but we're going to go to Bromley first
Okay.
and talk about Bromley and Boreham Wood. So, yeah, do you want to get us into that?
Yeah, can do. Of course, Bromley faced Bournemouth, two very similar sides in the way they like to play. Two quite industrial sides have certainly both been in this division for a long time now, and so have the managers as well. I think they're the two longest serving managers in this division. I do believe it. I hope I've got that correct anyway. And it was one that I predicted to be quite low scoring. And I think a lot of people probably didn't think it'd be as straightforward for Bromley as it would be. Well, no, as I think a lot of people, sorry, I should say, saw this coming. Maybe not being straightforward for Bromley because they're playing against a side that play quite similar to them. And yeah, it's certainly not one on paper that looks like it's going to be a firecracker. But yeah, it was actually high scoring at a 2-all draw. Yeah, I think for Bromley's perspective, you're going to have results, not be getting the 3 points that you need against sides that are struggling. So I wouldn't be too concerned as a Bromley fan. Of course, you look at the results as of late, a few draws in there against Maidenhead as well. And I don't think it's too concerning. I just think the way Bromley like to play, they're going to struggle against sides that play quite similar to them, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Probably do better against the sides that like to play the more attractive football. But from Bournemouth's perspective, it's a very good point away from home, and we're certainly seeing improvements from them in the last couple of weeks. Unbeaten in 4 now, and yeah, they're certainly a side that have underachieved so far this season. But getting results like that away at Bromley for me shows that they are improving.
I think what's interesting with that result for me is, and I wonder. I mean, Bromley fans, feel free to disagree and correct me, but I wonder because there's an 11-point gap between where Bromley are in second and fourth place. I wonder whether it's they're starting to get a little bit complacent and are taking the foot off the gas a little bit because they think that they've got quite a big gap comfortable there to the rest of the teams in the playoffs, and obviously they'll avoid that dreaded eliminator game, won't they? So yeah, I think for me it's just maybe a bit of complacency but yeah, who knows? I mean, you look at the game itself and um it was it was actually Boreham Wood that saved the game pretty much, weren't it? So Bromley were 2-1 up, thanks to Whiteley and Reynolds, and then um Sass Davis pulled one back um, for Boreham Wood, and then it was Apaya to score the equalising goal a minute from time. So you could argue that really Bromley threw that one away. But like you say, Boreham Wood is starting to come back in. We've had discussions about Boreham Wood on this podcast about whether the sort of too fickle with the sort of play style and whether because they don't really change the squad as such, do they? Boreham Wood. They've had the same bulk of players for maybe 3-4 seasons now, and we talked on the podcast recently about whether it's time to freshen up. But like you say, they seem very resolute and they seem to finally be picking up the form. So yeah, I think that's an interesting but fair result, really.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with you on that. The only thing I probably would disagree with you on is maybe the complacency bit. I think any side that's probably second in the league at the moment, you look where they are. I think every time you might have and I wouldn't even class it as a blip because it's probably two games you might say you want to win. But for me, I think if they start losing, if they lose the next couple of games, I know they've got Aldershot away, which is a big game, then Fylde and then Hartlepool, that's when you'd start to maybe thinking they're going through a bit too much of a blip and maybe they're being a bit complacent about them being second. I do understand your point there, but I think for me, I think sides like Bromley and Barnet know how much of an advantage it'd be because the two sides that have been in the playoffs before to be in second and third, that they will not be thinking about taking their foot off the gas at all. I think it'd be too important for those two sides to um, finishing second and third because of the advantage you get in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, I I think before we move on to the final game, now is probably the right time to take a listen to this week's sponsors, and so we'll be back in about a minute's time, and we will dissect the last game, and then finally get into the juicy part of the podcast and talk transfers. So we'll be back in a second. Right, perfect. So we're always very thankful for our sponsors here at Luxport Media. So thank you for that. And let's carry on with the analysis of the action. So we've got one more game to bring you now, and it was a big game and quite a surprising game again. Obviously it's Kidderminster 4, Aldershot Town 2, and it was quite a big game in more than one sense of the word, really. So it turned out to be Stokes' last game for Aldershot, which we'll talk about later. And also, it was Kidderminster's um, first game under Phil Brown. So, yeah, I mean, Phil Brown to me doesn't ever strike me as a. I always say this, and I don't want to sound too rude, but there's always your crop of like traditional English old school managers that always get jobs in the lower leagues, and Phil Brown is one of them. He's not brilliant, but he's also he'll also save you from a scrap. It's a bit like Big Sam. He's like the low league
Yeah.
version of Big Sam to me. And look, he's come in and done a job. But I think in the first half of the game, you could argue really that um, that Aldershot were in control really. So yeah, what are your thoughts and what are you thinking, Luke?
Well, I think you come into this game and you look at the difference between the two sides. Aldershot actually struggled against Kidderminster. They actually managed to win, but struggled against them earlier on in the season and scrapped a 1-0 win, I believe, against them earlier on in the season. You look at Aldershot going into this game, of course, I think they were desperate to get back to league action after they'd been knocked out of the FA Cup, followed by being knocked out of the FA Trophy, which was a competition that they took serious because they're very passionate about getting to Wembley because they're probably one of the only clubs of a club of that size that have not been to Wembley yet in their entire existence. So you'd be happy to be back to league action. You'd be thinking going away from home to a side, bottom of the league table, still as I speak now. You'd be saying this is a perfect game for us to get back to winning ways and show that we mean
Absolutely.
business in the league. And going 2-0 up away at a side that, the lowest goal scorers in the division is a perfect start. Kidderminster, but prior to that game, had only scored 20 goals all season in 28 matches. You'd be thinking going 2-0 up, you'd be pretty comfortable going there. But maybe we're seeing a change now since Phil Brown's come in. He's a manager that I think he's a bit like the Hartlepool new manager. He's not a manager that particularly excites me. But for me, a club like Kidderminster at the moment in their position, they're not going to be attracting the most exciting managers. And I think it takes a manager like Phil Brown to go in, who's clearly got the experience at this level, knows all the teams off the back of his hand, and knows what the league's about to come in
Yeah.
there. And I think just going back to the point of being 2-0 down, I think getting back into the game shows a lot and shows something different to this Kidderminster side and shows that he's had an instant impact there. And you have to say, Kidderminster, they're still bringing in at one or two players. We've seen Goldo Mateo, he's come in, he's proven himself in the league below and at this level to a certain point when he was at Halifax, and I think was he at Wrexham as well after that. So for me, I think from Kidderminster, I think it shows a lot of character for them to still be fighting and, to score 4 goals when you were 2-0 down. It's probably the result of the season. Well, it is the result of the season so far for them. So for me, fair play to Kidderminster, and maybe, just maybe, this will be the start of their hope quest for survival this season.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think we've just hit the nail on the head there with like Phil Brown's style and stuff. Like he's an attractive manager by any stretch of the imagination, but he is a manager that you'll know will get his team to run through brick walls. He'll want his team to be the ones that are doing the most running in games. And sometimes when you're in a relegation scrap, that's what you need. You need that fire in your belly, and you need that sort of grit and determination. And look, he's got a hell of a job on his hands to do, but if he manages to do it, I think that'll be up there with probably especially recent time greatest achievements in his career. But yeah, like it's an interesting one, really. I mean, we might as well touch upon it now. So Aldershot, obviously that result leaves them uh, only 1 point adrift of Rochdale in seventh, but with a game in hand actually. But obviously they have just lost Stokes. So what are we thinking for Aldershot's like
Um,
second half of the season? And also I want to put some time aside for that transfer itself, because to go from the fifth tier um, to the second tier is quite remarkable, isn't it?
yeah, I'll just point out on that transfer, he has actually been loaned back to Aldershot, so they've actually got him for
Okay.
the season. So it's kind of, I actually read it wrong at first, but it's actually a good deal when you think about it because they've got a fee for him, which will be quite a substantial fee, and will be good and very beneficial to Aldershot. But they've also got him for the second half of the season, and I think you can't argue with that business. It's very, very good business from Aldershot. And I think with what's been happening in recent weeks, in the blip that maybe you'd say they've had, this has one silver lining with Obviously, Josh Stokes extending his stay at Aldershot and not actually leaving. In
Yeah,
recent years, what we've seen at a side like Gateshead, they've got a standout player, Stephen Ween, for example. He just goes straight into the higher leagues, doesn't get a loan back or anything like that. He's literally there. So I
yeah,
think for Aldershot to do that and get the loan back says a lot about them. But yeah, of course, they're sitting 10th at the moment. It's not that bad, but I think the FA Cup and the FA Trophy might have damaged their position at the moment
yeah,
because there's always this saying, isn't there? You'd rather have points on the board than those games in
definitely.
hand, and I'd
Yeah,
agree with that. And I think we saw with Ball and Wood a couple of seasons ago when they had their FA Cup and FA Trophy journey, it kind of was detrimental to their playoff chase come the end of the season. And I think now what we've seen when Aldershot had a few games in hand to finish comfortably inside the playoffs. Now they're outside of the playoffs, and it's actually not in their hands because Halifax and Gateshead are both above them as well. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
yeah. To me, I think before we start on the transfer stuff, I think just touching upon tomorrow, there's going to be some big games in the sort of in and around the playoff positions that will sort of give you an indication of who is kind of there to stay and who will drop off. So the two big ones for me, and again, I'm trying not to be biased, but it is a big game. So you've got Rochdale away to Altringham, which is a massive game for. You'd probably say it's more of a must win for Rochdale than Altrincham at this point, because I think I do. I mean, I've give Jim McNulty all the credit in the world since we started this podcast, and trust me, that's hard to do sometimes when you're a staunch Oldham fan. But he deserves it, and they deserve it. But I do think at some point the injuries and the lack of funds are going to catch up with them. So, but if they can get a point away at Altrincham tomorrow, then maybe not. And then obviously you've also got a very, very big game down at Boundary Park tomorrow as well with Oldham versus Barnet. Now, you could either look at this two ways. So you could look at this the last time Barnet came to um, Boundary Park, Idris Kanu absolutely tore us to shreds. And we were the second best team on our own turf. But if you go this season, we've gone to Barnet and beat them 4-1 on TV. So you know what I mean. It's anyone's game that really. I think I would probably argue. I mean, it's hard for me not to argue against, but as the form, I was going to call us a form team, but then I don't know whether you can look past Chesterfield. But as one of the form teams at the minute in the division, and being at home, I would fancy Oldham to be able to just about secure the job. But I do think it's going to be quite a high scoring game because we can score a lot, but we'll also concede a lot. Like we've won the last three in the game. We don't talk about Headington in the FA Trophy, Luke. Okay, that was the second team. That doesn't count. Um, but in terms of the league, we've won our last three and we've won our last five away from home as well. So it's going to be a
Yeah,
really interesting battle, and I think them two games tomorrow, especially, will give you a good indication of who's going to fall out from the playoffs, but also who's in there to stay.
just touching on your side, Oldham, then, and I know at the moment they're the side for me that I'm actually predicting to finish fourth come the end of the season because I think with the
I'll
players
take
they've
that.
brought in now,
I'll take that,
and the
Luke.
way they're playing, under Mickey Mellon, they actually averaged 2 points a game. If you average 2 points a game throughout a season, they would have finished second this season. The way it's going at the moment, anyway. So for me, I genuinely think they'll finish fourth. The only issue you might have with Oldham at the moment is that home form. They're 16th in the league based off
Yeah,
home form, but they're second best away. They're playing against the Barnet side, who've got the fifth best away record coming into this game. Of course, they're actually third in the league at the moment. I believe they're third, or they might be, yeah, they're third in the league at the moment. Do you think there's any concerns there for you, or do you just think it's coincidence why you're 16th in the league at home? Of course, playing against a fellow playoff candidate tomorrow night.
so I've been having this conversation with my dad all the way through the season, and it might seem a bit of a weird thing to say, but it's something we genuinely believe. What I think it is I think being one of the bigger teams in this division that Oldham are, even without my bias on, we are one of the bigger teams in the division. I don't think sometimes we can raise our game for teams coming to Boundary Park. I think we struggle to play in front of like 8,500, 8,000 fans on a regular basis at home because we've not had that for years. We've only started getting them numbers since the Rothwells took over, and I think sometimes the players get a little bit nervous and just kind of can't really shake the responsibility. But then you go away from home and for some reason, we we've been playing like prime Barcelona away from home. You know, like it's a really sticky one. But in terms of the game tomorrow, have like I don't have any sort of I was going to say I don't have any doubts, but I don't have any worries as such that we won't give a good game and we won't be able to deal with Barnet. I think we, I mean, it might be very sort of naive for me to say, but I think I look at Barnet and I think you try and mark Kabamba out the game and you mark Kanu out the game. I know Kanu especially is easier said than done, but then you probably go on to win the game. That's exactly what we did at their place, and we got the result. But this will be interesting because I've been going back and forth with the guys from the Bees podcast, the Barnet podcast all week, and we've been having banter, and they'll probably be on their podcast tonight or whenever they do it this week, saying the exact same thing that I've just said for Oldham for Barnet. So I think both sets of supporters will be expecting to win the game. So it'll be an interesting viewing tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly should be.
So going into the favorite part of the podcast or the most exciting part of the podcast, it is we're now very, very deep into the transfer window, Luke, and I only feel right. I should really sort of take away with what my boys have done, not just this window really, because I think we've had a really strong window. Again, I'm trying not to be biased, but I do think you look at the players that we have brought in, and we've definitely strengthened the side. But especially today, we've managed to get a guy that we chased all summer, rejected Chesterfield, and then ended up going to Barnsley. But in the weirdest turn of events, he's now back. Well, I say back at Boundary Park. He's now rocked up to Boundary Park on loan for the rest of the season in Andrew Dallas. And for me, obviously, there's question marks there a little bit because obviously I think he only played like 5-6 times with Barnsley. I think he scored on his debut, didn't they? They won 7-0, I think, didn't they? And he scored in that game, and I thought, oh, he's going to go on and kick on. But then for some reason or another, it was Barnsley's prerogative to loan him out to Scotland, and he went to Kilmarnock, and I think he played maybe 15, 16 times, and for some reason it just didn't happen for him there. But now he's come back to the division. Well, last year he got over 20 goals, and you're looking and you're thinking, at this division, really, with a front two of James Norwood, who I'm expecting to be out for 2 to 3 weeks, maybe as well, with a hamstring strain. But obviously, you've got suitable replacements for this division, like God's number 9, Mike Fondup coming in, and Kurt Willoughby and things like that. So I'm not too worried really. But when them two are back and form a partnership, you could be looking at a 40 partnership, a 40 goal partnership. Like that's how good both of them players are. You know what I mean? So it's scary, really, the squad depth, especially in the attacking areas that we've got now. And I don't think we're finished either yet, really. So I've been doing a lot of digging today, and I've found out some stuff, and I can say with pretty much certainty that in the week coming up, Oldham are going to sign one more player, I think, to round off our transfer business in January. And that player, I've been given 3 adjectives from my source, and we've been discussing this, and you've given me one name that you might want to share. Um, the 3 adjectives that I'm going to share, because I know there's a lot of Latics fans listening, is it's going to be a winger. He's got a lot of pace, and he's played at a higher pedigree. Now, Luke, do you want to tell the audience the name that you came up with before recording and why you think that could be a good fit?
Yeah, well, I think there's only 3 labels there, which kind of narrows it down, especially when you go into the higher leagues. But the one name that sticks to my mind, I'm not saying this is the one, but the one that just suddenly comes to my head is Junior Moraes, who's at Notts County. He's fast, he produces goals, he's proven himself at this level. He's also gone and played in the division above at Notts County. Of course, at the moment, with the amount of depth that Notts County have got, he hasn't particularly been needed so far this season, and he's only actually made 8 appearances for Notts, and could potentially be a possibility that he goes into the lower leagues. But the only maybe question mark would be Stuart Maynard coming in now. He'll be well aware of what Junior Moraes can offer, and I think he'll be certainly one that will be up for getting the best out of the players that have come from the lower leagues as well as those players that are currently there. But that's the one name. I'm sure as this podcast goes on, I'll think of 1 or 2 more as well.
Well, do you want to talk upon? Obviously, you're probably best placed to talk about it. I don't really know much. In terms of, have Fax had much January transfer business going on, ingoings, outgoings? Like, have you got any rumours on your side that you want to share?
Halifax is very different to Oldham in that rumours kind of circle, if that makes sense, because of course it doesn't publicly get announced on Twitter. Where Oldham, hours before, there's
Yeah.
rumours going around everywhere. Where Halifax, they kind of go about the business quietly, and it just comes out of nowhere, and it's kind of nobody. We have actually made one signing so far. He's a striker, which is something that we certainly have needed. So it's good to see that we've brought in somebody now. The name's gone out of my head. I think it was something George, but he was obviously at Birmingham City. He's had a loan in the league below. Actually scored a fair few goals in the league below. I think 4 goals in 7 appearances. He's had his injury issues himself, and I think that might be why he's been playing at such low level. And I think what Halifax is well known for is you don't know who they are when they come to the side, but you know who they are once they leave. And I think this could be another example. And I do genuinely think maybe if we don't, even if we don't see the best of him this season, he could be someone that maybe next season could be a big name and might, I think, will eventually go into the Football League. But apart from that, we've had it being announced that apparently we're bringing in a midfielder on the Halifax Courier have announced that,
I
and that's
I think
been announced.
I
Yeah,
think I might be aware of who that midfielder might be actually.
are you allowed to publicly announce that?
I
Or
was gonna. I don't. I tell you what. I tell you what. I'll tell you after we finish recording, and if you think
okay,
it's strong enough, then you can do whatever you want to do with that information because I've
yeah,
passed it off then. But yeah,
I want to
I'll
be more than
dissect that
then.
with you after the recording.
Yeah,
But yeah, so obviously today was always going to be a bit of a shorter podcast episode because of only the 4 games surviving the weather. But just as kind of a little bit of fun before the before we wrap the episode up, I just wanted to say if you could pick a name or a position. Well, I'll go name actually for your
yeah,
side currently. It can be as like fantasy you want it to be. Obviously, we can't both just say Lionel Messi up front. Like, you know what I mean? It's got to have a little bit of realism to it. If you could pick one January signing to like round off your window for your club, what would it be? Shall I go first?
yeah. You go first then.
Okay, so I'll go first, and I'm gonna keep it quite realistic. And again, this isn't to try and wind up the bees pod lads, but we've been linked this January with a move for Idris Kanu. Um, and for me, all we need now, so going into January, we needed to like strengthen the right back position, which we have now um, with a new acquisition in the right back position. We needed to strengthen midfield with Tom Connellan. We needed a striker that was different to all our other strikers that could run in behind,
Yeah,
and now we've got that with Andrew Dallas. And I think all that's left is a pacey winger with a bit of skill, and Idris Khan fits that bill. And like, if the rumours are to be believed, he's not very happy at the minute at Barnet because they're playing him left back. I mean, it does seem a bit crazy to me that you've got probably the best winger in the division and you're putting him in a defensive role. But listen, Barnet a third, so obviously something's working for them. But I know he's not very happy with that situation at the minute, so that would be one to keep an eye on, maybe. But that would be my dream. But I don't know whether it's going to happen. But maybe he. The thing is, he fits the bill of them three criteria points, doesn't he? Really, because he played for Peterborough. He's got pace and he's a winger. So I tell you what, if we sign Idris Kanu this week as well, you might as well give us a playoff trophy now, Luke. But I don't
yeah.
think that's my fantasy signing. What about you?
I'm gonna. It's kind of realistic, but then it's not because we won't go in for him because he's at a club. But I'm going to keep it nationally. That's probably a better way of putting it. I would like Mancini at Halifax. It wouldn't happen, but he'd be the type of player that I'd want. I think he's someone that offers goals and goal contributions as well. He's exciting to watch, and I think he'd get the best out of the other players in the side. I think Josh Stokes is certainly someone that I would love to see at Halifax, and I do wish that he was someone that we might have signed at the start of the season because he's certainly a talent. But of course, that had never happen. And probably Chris Clark as well. I'd like
Mm-hmm.
to look at Altringham. I've kind of gone off topic now because he said one. But no, I think Maybe I'd look at an Oldham striker because you've got loads of strikers there, and I think
Get your
that
hands off
that'll.
James Norwood.
No, I was thinking of the goat Fondop.
Oh, you want Fondant?
You know,
Okay, maybe we can come to an agreement there, I'm sure.
no, I'm only joking. You can keep him, but no, I'd look at someone maybe like Reed. I think he was someone that I think a lot of people said I could see him going there when you had all your issues with him and his Instagram story, and I think he'd probably be the most realistic one that I'd like to see at Halifax, and I think he'd do okay at the Shea, to be fair, but I don't think we'd go in for him with his personality, personally, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
it's an interesting one with Reedy
Yeah,
because personally I can't see him playing for us again this season, so it'll be interesting to see what
maybe then.
happens with him.
Hmm.
But in terms of the podcast and everything we wanted to cover, I think that is episode done for me. Unless you've got anything that you
Yeah,
wanted to bring up. This, like I said, this episode was always going to be a bit shorter with the reduced schedule, but I hope you've enjoyed me in the hot seat this week, and Grant will be back next week, and I'll be just back to being one of the crew. So I've enjoyed the responsibility. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have enjoyed listening, be sure to find us on Spotify and find us on Apple Music and where else you stream and listen to your podcast. And make sure to leave a 5-star review. But that's it for today. So I've been Aaron, and Luke, if you want to sign off, and then we're good, yeah.
yeah. Thanks for having me on once again, Aaron. It's been good to speak to you and then catch up about the National League, and yeah, I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Amazing. See you next week.